Good morning. I'm Mike Ezell, the Park Naturalist at Lake Guntersville State Park. This morning, we're going to go off on the Tom Bevill Trail of Lake Guntersville State Park, and we're going to explore a little bit of local recent history of the park and the Guntersville area. I'm going to talk to you about people that used to live here, and I say local history, we're talking about 2-3 generations back. So come along and join me as we explore Tom Bevill. We're on the Tom Bevill Trail. The Tom Bevill goes around Ellenberg Mountain, which is the mountain to the west. Basically, Lake Guntersville State Park sits atop 3 mountains that are part of Sand Mountain. We have to the east, we have Stubblefield. On the eastern part of the park, we have Taylor Mountain, which is where Lake Guntersville Lodge sits. And to the west, toward the city of Guntersville, we have Ellenberg Mountain, which is right up the hill. I want to point out that the part of the trail that we're on today, the Tom Bevill Trail, as you can see, this is a large bank here. This was cut out. What we're following on the trail is an old road. For all practical purposes, this was a driveway that leads to one of the 38 known home sites that are covered up and abandoned, but within our park. Come with me and we'll continue up this driveway. Everything around the local history of Guntersville centers around the Tennessee River. The Tennessee River, with TVA established in 1933, in the midst of the Great Depression, which I always contend that most people here in Alabama had no idea they were in the Great Depression because they were so poor anyway. The TVA started building dams along the Tennessee River in order to tame it for navigation. They built Guntersville Dam, one of the last ones they built, because this area of the river was actually pretty tame compared to other parts like the Muscle Shoals and the Tennessee River Gorge up around Chattanooga. This part was fairly navigable. Hence, Gunner's Landing was established as a place to take goods, cotton, corn, all these things that these farmers grew, and transport them and sell them to markets elsewhere. Guntersville Dam was finished in 1939 and provided a navigable 9-foot deep channel all the way from Knoxville to Paducah, Kentucky. When they inundated the land around Guntersville Lake, they basically covered up the most fertile farmland in the area. So most of these farmers 3 generations ago didn't try to farm up here on these rocky hillsides. The fertile ground was down in the bottomland around the river and is now covered up by water. This land had been occupied by the Native Americans all the way back to pre-Ice Age because of its food supply, its fertile ground, and they grew corn for subsistence. Remember, this is 3 generations ago. You have no grocery stores. You had to grow everything you ate in these days. Also, I mentioned this road. No 4-wheel drives on this road, guys, okay? This is wagon. This is horse and wagon and mule to get your crop you grow, to get your paycheck, get it out to the river, sell it, and ship it out. Here along Tom Bevill if you look up and notice, you'll see a straight piece of land that looks like a farmer's terrace. Now, the thing about nature is that nature is random. Trees don't grow in rows in nature. And also, rocks don't sit in straight lines. So if you'll notice this, this is a rock wall that was built pre-1940 to enhance and build a what you call driveway for what used to be a very large farmhouse that sat in this area here. With the fertile ground being in the bottom land down on the river, which is about a half a mile away, most of the farmers, for health reasons, lived in the uplands and worked in the bottomlands. The reason for that? Mosquitoes and malaria, which was rampant in those days. So if you wanted to keep your family healthy, you built your house up here in the uplands. Another thing they had to think about was water supply. And if you look very closely in this area where this large farmhouse was, these trees here are roughly 80 years old, which is roughly the age of the lake. So this house was probably destroyed and flattened near the time that our lake was inundated. Follow me as we come up the hill. Let's look for any signs of the old home place. We've also got Christmas ferns here everywhere. Here's a sure sign of a home place in Lake Guntersville or any other area of Alabama. These are bulbs that were planted years ago, generations ago, from the front yard of an old house. These don't naturally occur out in nature. Somebody had to bring them in. Most of them are imported bulbs, daffodils and things. If you see these out in the woods, more than likely you got the sign of an old home place. Once again, we're returning to this man-made wall, which is obviously, now remember, this is also the time we have no backhoes and dump trucks. All this is done by manual labor and mules to take these rocks, which were actually pretty close, and rolling down Ellenberg Mountain behind us, and put them in this formation down through here to nicely frame the front wall of this former residence. According to one of my predecessors, Miss Linda Reynolds, who still lives in Guntersville, Alabama, she has associated the name Masters with this home place in her research. Once again, there was a small community around. There's been home places located down toward the lake, one up on the top of the mountain that is associated with the Ellenberg name, from which the mountain is named, and others around in this area. Locally, there is a King's Chapel, the name King, Terrell, and some others that still have their vestiges in names for different landmarks and trails here at Lake Guntersville State Park. These folks were raised their kids here, raised a generation. How this got to the state parks, the original park began with TVA land purchases in 1939 as they inundated the river bottom down there. TVA bought up all the land from even unwilling buyers at the time, but the water was coming. They had no choice but to sell and get out. And then around 1947, part of that land on the shoreline, TVA sold to the state of Alabama, which started what was called Little Mountain State Park at the beginning. And then over the years, as willing sellers sold off the adjacent land here on Ellenberg and Taylor Mountain, All this land was added to then Lake Guntersville State Park and got the acreage of our beautiful playground here up to 7,000 acres. Going further here at the master's home site, we see some more daffodils in the backyard, hyacinths brought in and planted, but here we've got a pile of rocks together. Over by the root cellar next door, I suspect that this pile of rocks, seeing how most of them have squared off edges, might have been a chimney. Chimney building was really big in those days. Remember, this is before gas and electric heat. So you built a house, first thing you gotta have is a chimney. And these rocks are probably local, were probably stacked together at some time. So if you're out in the woods of Guntersville and you see a pile of rocks that just kind of stands out and doesn't look like it belongs in there, yes, you may be on a chimney on one of 38 home sites that Miss Linda Reynolds has identified in this area. Depression in the ground right at or near the house. This may have been a well or a cistern. Of course, you build a house, you got to have a consistent water supply. Most of our settlements along the Tennessee River, Huntsville has a big spring, Tuscumbia has cold spring. Springs are abundant in the karst geography of North Alabama, and of course that with the food supply of fish and waterfowl supplied by the river has fed humans for 12,000 years now. So we're thinking lined with rocks, probably a cistern to hold spring water. This side of the mountain facing east gets very little sunlight, a lot of shade, and a lot of water because we have a spring up the hill from here. So it's a perfect place for growing Christmas fern. And as you can see, it is a virtual Eden in the understory of these oaks and pines with ferns everywhere. I've been a lot of places in Alabama, but I've seen very few that would support this many ferns in one place. As we're headed further up the mountain, you can see here's more of our rock wall that was built for this old logging road. Heavily used back 3 generations ago. Also on this side of the home place, you see the rocks piled up. Building a path or roadway, if you wish, up into the home site that we just visited. All of this manual labor. Of course, our ancestors were not formally, a lot of them were not formally educated, but they were sheer geniuses just to survive. A homage to their survival is just the fact that we're here. But one thing you have to survive, to build your home place, is a spring, preferably uphill from your house. We have a lot of groundwater here, and this is the spring that served the home place that we were looking at. This is where water seeps out. In those days, pretty well purified, and this one will be running even in dry weather and give you a steady water supply. So you're building here, you have your spring uphill, because water weighs 8 pounds a gallon. You don't want to haul it very far, and you don't want to haul it uphill. So you get your spring uphill, you build your house, and of course your bivvy goes downhill. Okay, so it's not to contaminate your own water supply. If you'll listen really closely, you can hear the steady water coming out. we've just shown you a portion of an old home place along the Tom Bevill Trail. Tom Bevill Trail goes for about 4 miles around Ellenberg Mountain. As you go over to the south, there are 2 places to access the trail from Highway 227 at Short Creek. It can also be accessed where we came in from the lakeside cabins at Lake Guntersville State Park. Be sure to come out, give this and all of our trails some exploration and see what you can find out here. Many things get covered over, but time always leaves its mark on our landscape. Thank you for joining me today.